To all our co-good shepherd educators, a pleasant afternoon. So we are very fortunate to be gathered here this afternoon for another meaningful leadership session. This time, as we reflect more deeply on the powerful and the relevant theme of vulnerability. As we continue to open ourselves to the movement of the Spirit, may today's session invite us into a space of greater honesty, courage, and connection. We are especially blessed to welcome back someone who has already inspired many of us, Sister Michelle Lopez. We all had the privilege of meeting Sister Michelle in Pattaya during our Joy of Leadership gathering, where her presence and insights left a lasting impression. We know that Sister Michelle was instrumental in establishing the Fountain of Life Good Shepherd services in Pattaya, Thailand. And later, she was called to respond to the needs of women and girls in Cambodia, particularly those affected by poverty. Today, she continues this mission with dedication to the Fountain of Life Center in Cambodia. Recently, Sister Michelle also offered a moving talk on vulnerability to members of the congregation. It is truly fitting that she is with us today to lead us in a deeper exploration of this very important theme on vulnerability. Let us all welcome and give a warm and heartfelt welcome again to Sister Michelle Lopez.
Thank you very much. And Shaji, I'll share screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. You can share screen, you will get it.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
You can go to the presenter mode. If you can click on the presenter mode, you will come to the... Okay.
Just now it was moving now.
It's okay, but then can you click on the presenter mode? You will be able to get the full screen.
You can't see the bottom. You cannot see the bottom. Go up, how to go? Oh, close this one. And then go up.
Yes.
To make it very big. This one. And then how to take off this one? Reading.
Down.
How to take on this one? Readings mode. Okay.
Let's give Sister Michelle.
I'm getting it.
The next one.
Okay. All right.
Yes, we are there. Thank you.
Sorry for the delay. Okay. First of all, I want to thank the people who prepared the prayer. It was really a very, very meaningful prayer. And it actually highlighted some of the things that I will be sharing. So when I last spoke on leadership and vulnerability, I was moved by the response of some of the participants who came up to me afterwards to say that my sharing helped them to make the shift from the head to the heart. And I want to continue in that same spirit. So today in my sharing on vulnerability, I will highlight one very important and powerful, but often hidden companion of vulnerability, and that is shame. Now, shame is an emotion that is deeply intertwined with our sense of self, our courage, and our connection with others, our leadership, and our faith. This hidden companion of vulnerability, which we call shame, often sits silently beneath the surface of our leadership, our relationship, and even our faith. So let us gently and honestly see what opens up when we give language and light to the places we usually keep in the dark. Some of us have been conditioned to believe that vulnerability equals weakness, strength equals control, power equals independence. If we look at this equation, it might sound like a formula for success, but underneath, something else is operating. Deeply hidden within that equation are some powerful and painful forces: shame, fear, and guilt. And they are not just emotions, they are barriers to connection, to authenticity, and love. Can shame be transformative? How does it work? So let us reflect on shame. Shame is like a hidden driver behind so many of our struggles with vulnerability. Carl Jung warns us that shame is a soul-eating emotion. Shame can disconnect us from our wholeness unless it is brought into the light through integration. Two important questions we need to ask ourselves are: has shame a transformative value? And why does it matter that we understand how shame works? Not because shame is holy in itself, but because it brings us face to face with the most sacred and vulnerable questions we ask ourselves. The questions we never outgrow. Am I lovable? Am I worthy? Am I enough? Am I okay? These are some of the questions we quietly carry in our hearts. No matter how matured or successful we become, these questions often remain. And they shape how we show up, what we hide, and what we strive for. And if we listened with a contemplative heart to these questions, we might hear the voice of the divine saying, "You are a spark of the divine. I created you in my own image and likeness. You are a miracle." Shame lives in the gap between the head and the heart. It is important to know that when shame goes unexamined, it doesn't disappear. It is stuck in the gap between the head and the heart. It affects our style of leadership, our relationship, our silence, and our striving. Most importantly, shame can distort our self-image. It can even rewrite the story we tell ourselves about who we are. The sad reality is that even though we know we are worthy and made in the image of the divine, we are not convinced, because our past forms the lens we see through. Old patterns make us hesitate. We struggle to believe. Our experience outweighs conviction. The head knows, but the heart still struggles. We may believe it in our heads that we are a spark of the divine, or we are the image of God. We might even speak it aloud in faith, but deep within, some of us carry hidden doubts shaped by wounds, rejection, comparison, or years of quiet shame. There seems to be a gap between what we know theologically and what we experience emotionally, and shame lives in that gap. Therefore, it is important to be aware that though shame is painful, it can also serve as a profound catalyst for inner growth and spiritual transformation, especially when engaged with honesty and compassion. And as Teresa Simmons recommended, we could use our coaching group as a safe space for these issues to surface. The path to healing is bringing shame into the light. True healing begins when we dare to bring our shame into the light, to name it, to face it, and gently offer it up instead of hiding it away. This requires vulnerability, which often feels risky, but healing cannot happen in the dark. What remains hidden tends to grow in power, whilst what is brought into the light loses its grip. For example, shame tells us, hide, protect, don't let them see. And vulnerability invites us to come into the light, to let ourselves be known. So we see that there is an ongoing tension within us. The desire to hide what is true within us versus the desire to come out into the open. There is an emotional equation that needs to be solved. And Mickey Carsten, the co-founder of the Bay Area Nonviolent Communications Community, reminds us that at each moment, there is an emotional equation to be solved. We are willing to confront discomfort and fear because we know that the outcome will be worth the discomfort for us. However, it is important that whether we choose vulnerability or protection, we have to make the choice with inner freedom. Vulnerability minus boundaries is not vulnerability. Maintaining boundaries is a skill rooted in wisdom and prudence. We all know that too much of anything is not good, and this includes vulnerability. It makes us open to harm. So the key question is, how much protection is actually helping me, and how much is actually holding us back from fully living? Brené Brown emphasizes that vulnerability is not about oversharing or indiscriminate disclosure, but it is about intentional openness in the service of connection and growth. There is a sacred wisdom in knowing what to share, when to share, and with whom to share. Healthy vulnerability is rooted in self-awareness. It is about being honestly seen in safe spaces at the right time. Example, your coaching group. As leaders, it is important to model transparency, but it is also important to practice prudence. Divine wisdom is necessary to navigate the interplay between shame and vulnerability. When we navigate the interplay between shame and vulnerability, it feels like walking on a sacred and often fragile path, and we need divine wisdom to walk this path. We live with opposing messages. Shame tells us we are not enough. It isolates us. It silences us and disconnects us. Vulnerability, on the other hand, reminds us we are worthy and made for connection. Because we receive these contradictory messages, we need divine wisdom to help us make choices. We will also learn as we grow in age and wisdom that contradictions are not enemies of truth. They stretch us, unsettle us, and in doing so, invites us into a deeper understanding of truth. Talking about contradictions, I work in Cambodia, a country that holds a monumental contradiction. We have the magnificent legacy of the Angkor Wat, and we have the painful memory of the Pol Pot genocide. For a bit of history, Angkor Wat was built in the 12th century and it is the wonder of the world. It is the largest temple in the world. The magnificent temple shows the architectural engineering greatness of the Khmer civilization. And at the same time, the people of Cambodia also experienced the devastating genocide when Pol Pot was in power in the 1970s. There is a stark contrast between the grandeur of the Angkor Wat and Pol Pot's genocide. These two symbols teach us the importance of acknowledging and growing through contradictions. Life is punctuated with contradictions, both on a personal and societal level. It is through the recognition and acceptance of these contradictions that we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of the human existence. Realness is the fruit of vulnerability, and it is the place where God waits. Brené Brown, who is the authority on vulnerability and shame, reminds us that vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It is having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. So as we navigate this interplay, it is not to choose one and reject the other. It is to say, I will show up. And over time, as I walk this path more often, I will soon discover something sacred. That vulnerability does not make us weak. It makes us real. And the divine meets us not in who we pretend to be, but in who we truly are. Or to put it in another way, in that sacred space of authenticity, we begin to recognize the divine more clearly. Guilt seeks repair and shame demands hiding. In the journey of authentic, vulnerable leadership, understanding the difference between shame and guilt is essential so that we can lead from a place of wholeness instead of hiding. Guilt is the internal sense that we have done something wrong. It says, I made a mistake and can lead to growth and responsibility. On the other hand, shame goes deeper and darker. It says, I am the mistake, attacking our sense of worth and dignity, pulling us away from others, from God, and even from our own soul. Shame is sometimes used as a weapon to control, to silence, to manipulate, to punish others, often in subtle, culturally accepted ways. The future of leadership is rooted in vulnerability and authenticity. The future of leadership will not belong to the most charismatic or the most invulnerable. It will belong to those who have learned to lead through vulnerability with open hands and hearts. It will draw its strength from the divine and will be shaped by the wisdom of the prophet Micah, who calls us to act justly, to love tenderly, and to walk humbly with our God. In this way, leadership becomes not a performance, but a sacred path of presence, vulnerability, courage, and compassion. This kind of leadership makes room for tension, for listening, for shared ownership, and mutual transformation. In a time when people are craving for truth, not perfection, vulnerable leadership offers a new and necessary way forward. The future of leadership won't be defined by how well we perform, because the AI will do that, but by how deeply we are connected. The way forward for leadership is sacred courage and creating a culture of grace. Sacred courage is the way forward. Leaders, knowing the real struggles behind making decisions anchored in mission goals or implementing chapter mandates, dare to courageously find ways to implement them, even though outcomes may be uncertain, risk real, and control is out of reach. Their leadership is rooted in divine guidance, nourished by the wisdom of the community, and shaped by the courage to be vulnerable. In this type of leadership, the leader is able to model a culture of grace, where people are welcomed as they are valued in their imperfections, are given room to grow, are invited to be vulnerable, are restored when they fall, not rejected. These kind of leaders are genuine leaders. They are not searchers for consensus, but modelers of consensus, as Martin Luther King said. By their moral authority, they are able to inspire, guide, and unify people around a shared vision or purpose. Dr. Joe shared about the importance of moral leadership and about being aligned with Good Shepherd values or with the values of one's own religion, whether it is Buddhism or Hinduism or Islam. And this alignment has to be constant. Consistency also includes emotional consistency. When leaders show up the same way, whether times are hard or easy. When leaders embody vulnerability and walk in alignment with deeply held values, something beautiful happens. People see integrity not just preached, but lived. And as Teresa Simmons said, it is about mirroring leaders become mirrors, reminding members of their own deepest calling. Or to put it in another way, when leaders can mirror with clarity and compassion, other members remember who they are. Vulnerable leadership becomes living expressions of the values that leaders teach. The persuasive power of their leadership is irresistible. The performance culture has invaded every sphere of life. Resisting the performance culture requires being countercultural. Individuals who often choose vulnerability and integrity over image. And as Dr. Joe mentioned, being countercultural is not an Asian trait due to the cultural values prioritizing collectivism, respect for hierarchy, and societal harmony. In a performance culture where authenticity is a rare gift, the human hunger for realness ignites a profound yearning within us, a deep-seated desire that cannot be satiated by superficial displays, but only by genuine connections. Life is becoming a stage for performance. The performance culture has invaded nearly every aspect of our lives. In the sphere of leadership, it can happen when we act like we have all the answers, when in reality we are actually unsure and struggling. On social media, most people carefully select what to share. Those successful parts of their lives, those parts that have been put together. But the messy human parts of loneliness, doubt, failure, arguments are often hidden because they make us feel vulnerable and exposed. Even in our spiritual life, we might be performing holiness instead of admitting brokenness. So, in a culture addicted to performance, we are starving for truth and realness. It is one of the deepest human yearnings to hear and to believe we are loved even before we perform. As leaders, we are not here to perform. We are here to walk with. And the synodal leadership invites us to lead with presence, to listen, and to offer the rare gift of realness in a world starving for it. Now, for those of us who are not from the Christian tradition, the synodal model of leadership has 3 pillars, and they are compassion, communion, participation, and mission. And the church and our congregation calls us to use the synodal model of leadership. This type of leadership is rooted in listening, collaboration, and shared discernment. It moves away from the top-down decision-making and instead emphasizes walking together, where every voice matters and the community journeys collectively together towards truth and mission. I would like to end this sharing by reflecting on the origins of shame and vulnerability. And I think in every tradition, we have stories that our ancestors tell us about shame and vulnerability. And so I have taken the story of Adam and Eve from our tradition. And the story of Adam and Eve is from the book of Genesis. And it provides a profound explanation of the origins of human vulnerability and shame. The book of Genesis literally means the book of the beginnings, right from the beginnings. And all the stories and the teachings in this book refer to the beginnings of humanity. Our ancestors told the story of Adam and Eve, not simply to explain how the world began, but to tell the truth of what it feels like to be human. And one of the first emotions we encounter in that story is shame. Adam and Eve, according to this story, they eat the fruit. And suddenly they see that they are naked. It is important to know that nothing about them has changed physically. What changes is their awareness. They go from being open and unashamed to vulnerability, fear, and shame. Their first instinct is to cover themselves, to hide, to withdraw from both each other and from God. And so they sewed fig leaves to cover themselves. But God calls to them and says, "Where are you?" This is the first time that shame and hiding are mentioned in the Bible, marking the human impulse to cover up and withdraw from God and others when vulnerable. Shame is about being seen and feeling unworthy. It is the moment when our own gaze turns against us and we want to hide like Adam and Eve. And we sow fig trees or masks to hide. But fig leaves do not last. Then God walks in the garden, or you might say, God walks in the evening of our lives and asks, "Where are you?" Not because God does not know where we are, but because we no longer know where we are. Shame disorients us, and we become strangers to ourselves. And God begins healing. The God of the Genesis, the God of the beginnings, made garments of skin and gives them to Adam and Eve. In other words, God is telling us, you don't have to hide, you don't have to cover yourselves alone. I will cover you. This is not rejection. This is the healing process of reconnecting us. And so my prayer is, when the God of Genesis asks, "Where are you?" it is only to remind us, "Let me cover you. You are still mine."